Good afternoon. Welcome to the October membership meeting. I'm Peggy Kelsey, the GMC board chair and an executive vice president at WEC Energy Group. We're together for the last meeting of the calendar year and have quite a few important announcements to make today that will continue to shape our organization and how we define our work. So we're looking forward to sharing that with you. We're also going to take a deeper dive into the important work we've been leading on our fiscal strength strategic priority. Before we get started, a reminder that at each table there are GMC note cards, and I would just ask that you hand them out as we start the meeting. Keep it in front of you. I'll remind you again at the end, but if anything pops up that you want to tell us, or a question you have, or a thought you have about what you're hearing as the day goes on, just jot it down there. By the end of the meeting, we'll have you drop them at the table. We've gotten some great feedback by this process so far. This past year has been focused on recreating a member-centric experience that defines how the GMC will continue to change our region. With 200 capable leaders defining our strategy, the board of directors is confident we're ready to address our community's most pressing needs today, tomorrow, and well into the future. As you know, we're going to take on the big things and create big solutions. And with the support of a full force of GMC members, we're really confident that we have the ability to lead this change. Speaking of the full force of our membership, if you haven't done so already as we get rolling here, please make sure you introduce yourself to the individuals around you. You may make a new connection, or you may help somebody else make a new connection. So we always ask you to do that at these meetings. As we created our new strategic plan, one consistent request from members was for us to create a consistent and sustainable dues structure to ensure we have what we need to do the work we identified. We sent out a communication to all members last week on this subject. I'm just going to provide a very short recap here today. The GMC is bringing long-standing initiatives to a close, as you know, and Joel will talk more about that shortly. And we're going to place all of our focus on the most critical issues that you and we have identified and dedicate all of our resources accordingly. This intentional move away from a program and initiative focus to one directed toward member engagement on major strategic issues will, of course, have financial implications for the GMC, as some GMC revenue and associated expenses were tied to very specific and discrete programs and initiatives. Together with stakeholders in the GMC Finance Committee, we are working to realign the dues structure to bring clarity and certainty to the process. In addition to a more transparent process, the proposed structure will help fulfill our organization's fiscal needs to carry out the very important work of our strategic plan. Our overarching objective in this regard is to ensure sustained member revenue through a predictable and fair dues structure. The GMC Finance Committee and Board will review the proposed dues structure in the next few weeks, and we will also, during that process, reach out directly to many of you to discuss the proposed changes and to take your important feedback. All of these steps bring us further down the path of taking up the most pressing community challenges with our members, with all of you at the forefront in charting the work and determining the outcome of a stronger community. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce a fellow GMC board member, Greg Wesley. Greg is going to highlight the important work of the Anti-Displacement Fund in our community. I warned Greg, I said, it may take me a few minutes and a glass of water to finish his bio, and he said, cut it down. I said, oh no, I'm not cutting it down. Greg earned his undergraduate degree from Indiana University Bloomington and his law degree from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. After a successful career in private legal practice, Greg joined the Medical College of Wisconsin, where today he serves as Senior Vice President, Strategic Alliances and Business Development. He is an MCW trustee and a fellow of the Wisconsin Law Foundation. In addition to the GMC, he serves on the boards of, deep breath, Trust for Professional Managers, MHS Health Wisconsin, Versity Inc., Milwaukee World Festival Inc., Teach for America Milwaukee, where he serves as board chair, the Johnson Foundation at Wingspread, the Greater Milwaukee Foundation, and the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Milwaukee, where he also serves as chair. In his spare time, Greg is the co-chair of MKE United's executive committee. And as I told him, said, anytime I try to argue I'm too busy to do something, I think, God darn you, Greg Wesley. So welcome, my friend Greg.
So I owe Peggy, but thank you all for being here. Good afternoon. Just really excited to share a little bit more about the work of MKE United and our Anti-Displacement Fund. I want to go to the second slide. We all know that investment is a good thing. It brings opportunity, creates flexibility, but sometimes opportunities have unintended consequences. And in 2016, property tax increases and displacement were identified as an unintended consequence of downtown revitalization. And in response to that, MKE United, which had a Downtown Action Agenda listening session series, learned that people were very concerned about displacement. But we also recognized that the City of Milwaukee had to continue to invest in downtown in a way that would allow this community to continue to grow. So using a cross-sector approach, MKE United established the Anti-Displacement Fund. And it was established to ensure that grants can be provided to long-time, income-eligible homeowners living near downtown and wanting to ensure they were not displaced because of increasing property taxes. But we also wanted to make sure that we could prove out that a community could invest in its downtown, but also care about its residents who lived near downtown. So the partners were convenient. Next slide. The partners are MKE United, which initiates fundraising, and that's why I'm here today. Riverworks, which serves as the administrative partner and outreach partner to community members. The Milwaukee Economic Development Corporation, which audits the completed applications. The Greater Milwaukee Foundation, and I'm going to take a pause and shout out my co-chair of MKE United, the Downtown Action Committee, Ellen Gilligan. Ellen and I worked very closely together from the very beginning of this effort, so the foundation has played a critical role. Thank you, Ellen. And the foundation serves as the fiscal agent and disperses the funds to the city treasurer when appropriate. And then the City of Milwaukee serves as the technical assistance provider in this effort. And the city, while recognizing the importance of increasing property taxes, and I'm sure the mayor has received calls around issues around displacement, there are limits about what the city can do associated with this, but they can be a technical assistance provider. So all these partners have come together to see if we can address an issue of displacement in a way that I just talked about earlier. Those are the partners. Next slide will show you the map of the areas of the city that this covers. To the north side of downtown and also to the south side of downtown. Very intentional, very thoughtful. That technical assistance support came from the city and its data. Next slide. So it's a pretty straightforward proposition. We talk about who is eligible. You have to have a couple of things. You have to reside in those geographic boundaries. You have to have owned your property since 2015. You have to be current on your property taxes, and you have to meet an income eligibility. Next slide. This is who the fund helps. I'm going to pause and let you read it very carefully. Next slide. And this is how the fund has supported people since it started in 2019. Now, Next slide will show that initially we were looking at this as a safety net aspect. We believe now it's moving to a model of practice, and we want to challenge people to support it. But our funding will end in 2027. Right now we want to raise $3 million. We have $1.8 million left to go. And that's why I'm here. I want to ask you to support the fund. Consider supporting the fund. Next slide. This will show who has supported the fund to date. We've received funding from both local and national organizations. I want to call out the Rocket Community Fund, who has supported this effort with a recent donation of $300,000. I want to take a moment of privilege and say that initially we were not on the Rocket Community Fund's radar. There was another community organization in this community that was participating in MK United that was identified as a potential funder. Turns out they were not able to meet the requirements. And Adrian Spencer, who's here this afternoon, encouraged us to pursue the funding, and we were successful. And the reason that the Rocket Community Fund recognizes supporting downtowns, they've supported areas in Detroit and other communities that have gone through significant underinvestment and had to reinvest in downtown. We're in a different place. People have heard me say this before. Our downtown is vibrant and growing, but it also can end up in a place where we push people out who have been the fabric of our community. And with this fund, we think we found a stopgap solution to that. So, next slide, which means that I would like to encourage everyone to consider supporting the MK United's Anti-Displacement Fund. So you have a QR code for those of you who are technologically savvy. Utilize it, and others who are not, can reach out to me or Ellen or the leadership of the Greater Milwaukee Committee for ways to support the Anti-Displacement Fund. Thank you for your time.
First of all, I want to note for the record that on the agenda, I think it said I was going to start at 12:15, and I think it's 12:15. So this may be a first in at least my tenure at the Greater Milwaukee Committee, and we'll try to stay on task if we can. But I also want to just express appreciation to Greg and Ellen and everybody who has been involved in the efforts around the Anti-Displacement Fund and so much around the MK United efforts over the last several years. As Peggy mentioned, there's quite a few updates to share, and I want to make sure that we let you know how things are going to ensue, because it's going to inform how our work progresses moving forward. You don't have to sit by yourself. I think somebody is over here telling you to come, To continue with the MK United update, the launch of our Milwaukee Appraiser Diversity Initiative will happen next spring. A formal partnership with the Milwaukee Urban League has been established, adding to the support that this program will receive from Employ Milwaukee. Funding has been secured to ensure that this pilot can support training costs and stipends for up to 10 appraisers for the duration of that first cohort in the year 2024. We shared in mid-October that Scale Up Milwaukee's work will continue under the leadership of the Business Council, which has the ability to continue and expand the critical mission of equitable economic prosperity in the City of Milwaukee. The Business Council will assume sole responsibility for scale-up programs beginning on January 1, 2024, and the process of transitioning programs, curriculum, and partners has begun. If you are and have been a current or past supporter of Scale-Up, we are reaching out to those people and those organizations to ensure that, to the extent possible, we can continue moving forward with those programs. So if you haven't heard from us, you will shortly. In the meantime, Scale Up is finishing a final cohort of Spark at the Greater Milwaukee Committee. It has an additional Meet the Masters program with GMC member Jerry Jandusa this week, and the final Scale Up Milwaukee Holiday Party and Spark graduation, which will include a series of grant opportunities for small businesses that is generously supported by J.P. Morgan Chase. In addition, on the programming side, we'll also sunset most programming that's been done through the Commons at the end of 2023. For the last decade, the Commons has been at the forefront of fostering and developing a vibrant, diverse ecosystem of talent, bridging the gap between generations and disciplines. A more detailed update on how this will proceed will be shared with membership via the newsletter in the coming days. The changes that we've outlined over the last several months will result in a different GMC, a smaller, more focused staff. For the last several years, we've operated with a staff of about 15, and we'll begin 2024 by design with a staff closer to half that number. We've worked and continue to work as a team, as an organization, to ensure that the next iteration of the Greater Milwaukee Committee will reflect our adopted strategy, complement existing efforts in our community. As part of that transition, Maggie Dowse, sitting right over here, who has been with the GMC for over 10 years as a co-founder of the Commons, has accepted a role with Fork Farms where she'll be reunited with former GMC teammate Michael Hosted and become part of an exciting partnership with Rockwell Automation that can change the future of urban farming. We look forward for what's to come for Maggie, but I hope you'll also join me in thanking her for all the work that she has done with us. So today we are releasing the City of Milwaukee Operational Review that was launched at the outset of 2023. Lots has happened since we worked with the mayor to put everything on the table about Milwaukee's fiscal future. If you think about it, when we embarked on this, it was no certainty that the city was going to be able to generate any additional local revenue through the work of lots of people. There have been significant strides on that, and while we've made great strides, there's still work to be done to ensure sustainable long-term fiscal strength. Our partner, Rob Henken, is here to outline where we are. I'll then share a few details about the report, which will be available in its entirety. Many of you have seen a final draft. It'll be available in its entirety on a link through our website, which we'll send out later today. And then I'll also today have a conversation with the mayor about his reactions and some of the work that we've done on that report before we turn the conversation back to you. So we'll start with Rob Henken from the Policy Forum, who continues to be a vital partner, not only for the Greater Milwaukee Committee, but for the community in general. My friend, Rob Henken.
Joel's a little taller than I am, so just bear with me for a minute. Thank you. Thanks, Joel, for that nice introduction. Thanks to all of you for, again, listening to me talk about City of Milwaukee finances. I bet you thought that you were done with that, but I don't think we'll ever be done with that. So my role this afternoon is to briefly bring you up to speed. The last time I talked to you about city finances, we were on the verge of disaster. So good news is we are no longer on the verge of disaster when it comes to the city budget, but we now have had the benefit of seeing the first post-Act 12 budget, and it is not totally put to rest yet. The mayor has proposed his budget. The Common Council has amended it. We are awaiting possible vetoes, but it is pretty close to being done. And it really gives us, at least us at the forum, our first opportunity to take a step back, reflect on Act 12, and see just where that leaves us, at least for the foreseeable future. So that's what I'm going to try to bring you up to speed on with just about a dozen slides or so. And then I do want to touch on what in many ways is a companion report, and this is the first actually in a two-part series of reports that the Wisconsin Policy Forum did on service sharing opportunities for back office services between the city and the county of Milwaukee. So I'm going to give you a sneak preview of that report, which is being released on Friday, and I think it'll be sort of nice bookends. Only the wonkiest among us will read what's in between those two bookends, but I think two nice bookends for city leaders and others in terms of trying to chart a path forward. So the forum did its annual review of the city budget. That report is available on our website. This is what it looks like. What I'm going to do is sort of review that report. Please keep in mind, the numbers that I am going to be citing are numbers from the mayor's proposed budget. As I just said, there have been budget amendments. In the grand scheme of things, they're not consequential from a fiscal perspective. I hope the mayor doesn't disagree. He's thinking about vetoes, so I'm sure many are consequential to him. But in the grand, big picture financial perspective, what the Common Council did in terms of his amendments sort of are on the edges, but the numbers I'm going to show you are about the proposed budget. So, as all of you know all too well, several months ago, this looked like we were on the precipice of some very severe budget cutting that nobody in this community has seen before, at least in recent memory. I've been doing this for 25 years in one capacity or another. Nothing has even come close. Entering this budget year before Act 12, city budget officials were estimating a gap of about $183 million. Now, what does that mean? That was actually based on the budget requests that came in from departments early in the spring, prior to the adoption of Act 12. So you have to take that 183 million number with a little bit of context here in that this is what departments were requesting. Unfortunately, in city government, departments, we have a department head with us, our Commissioner of City Development. Department heads are used to not getting what they requested. And so I would say to you that there are some like-to-haves as well as some must-haves in those budget requests. But still, after year after year after year of budget cutting, you have to take seriously what your departments are requesting, obviously. And so there was a hole of about $183 million. Lots of other things went into that hole, the need to increase the pension fund contribution, other factors. Then the summer happened. Act 12 happened. By the way, we are recognizing the GMC and the MMAC and the city and the county Wednesday at the Forum's Salute to Local Government event for the wonderful public-private partnership that resulted in the adoption of Act 12. Act 12 produced for the city overwhelmingly good news, but also added some costs. So added to that $183 million, we had about $47 million in increased pension costs that stemmed directly from the passage of Wisconsin Act 12. One of those features that created the need for increased cost was a requirement that the assumption used on investment earnings for the pension fund be reduced from 7.5% to 6.8%. I won't get into the nitty-gritty of that. I know we have accountants and actuaries in the room, but that added about $40 million worth of cost. There's also a provision that requires the city to make up the added costs to the Milwaukee Public Schools and MMSD, which have employees. Some of their workforce, minor portions, but still some of their workforces are covered by the city pension fund. So you put that together, a requirement of an added cost of about $47 million. On top of that, the city had underfunded its pension contribution in the 2023 budget. That is because at the time that that budget was passed a year ago, it was still unknown what the impacts of a very down year of the stock market in 2022 were going to have on the following year's pension contribution. So there was a need to make up for that underfunding. That added $25.5 million. So what you have is this mind-boggling. Keep in mind that the city general city purposes budget, the part of the budget that funds core departments and services, is about $700 million. And there was a deficit of $256 million. So that's a lot of money. The good news is Act 12 happened, and so that produced an estimated $184 million in 2024 from the 2% sales tax that was later approved by the Common Council and the mayor, as well as an infusion of about an additional $22 million of state shared revenue. So as you can see, the Act 12 benefits made up for the original structural gap and the Act 12 added costs, all but about $50 million of that. So still about a $50 million problem. Well, the good news is that this is the final year, 2024 will be the final year where pandemic relief aid from the American Rescue Plan Act is still available to city government. City originally received $394 million. They've been plugging those dollars into the previous two budgets to fill very steep holes in those budgets, and essentially $110 million left to be spent. And so the mayor's proposal was to put those dollars into, in this case, you're seeing that general city purposes budget. The full city budget is about $1.4 billion, but there are the water utility and other enterprise funds. So we really think about this $775 million or so. The decision was made in the proposed budget to use those ARPA dollars. So now you may be thinking to yourself, well, wait a second, Rob, you said the whole was $50 million. There's $110 million of ARPA being plugged into the budget. So where's that extra $60 million going? Well, not just because the mayor is sitting right here, but we'll say that we were pretty impressed with what the budget office and the mayor decided to propose with regard to that extra $60 million, because in many ways it's trying to get a head start and to get out in front of the day when those ARPA dollars are gone. That day is January 1st, 2025, and some of those structural difficulties return. So one thing that happened, and this is a very busy slide that I'm not going to explain, but essentially these ARPA dollars were plugged across major departmental budgets, mainly to boost salaries and benefits. And this was not only to cover those costs to continue. There's about a 2% cost of living adjustment for most city employees in 2024. But think about what perhaps is one of the foremost challenges facing local governments in this community, as it is for all of you, and that is an historically tight labor market. So as the city has had these financial problems year after year after year, for the most part, compensation increases were not tracking inflation. And in the case of the very high inflation we saw in 21 and 22, really not even coming close. Now, local governments often have a tough time competing for talent regardless of the inability to keep up with inflation. That exacerbated the problem. So one of the things that this city budget does, which we could argue about, but it takes into account the workforce challenges facing this government, and about $20 or $30 million of that extra $60 million was put into enhancing the compensation structure across the board for city government to try to make the city more competitive, again, in this historically tight labor market. So that was one of the uses. Another use, and this is a very fundamentally sound use of one-time monies like ARPA, is to spend them on things that won't create recurring expenses in the future, and in this case, that actually can reduce those recurring expenses in the future. So a decision was made to increase cash financing for the city's capital budget by about $37 million. So in a typical year, the city does very little cash financing. It borrows for most of its annual capital needs. Annual borrowing, as you can see, city leaders really tried for several years to try to cap it at about $75 or $80 million a year, but the city has very old infrastructure with a lot of need. So that money, that amount has gone up. It went down slightly in the proposed budget in 2024, but more importantly, again, about an extra $37 million of this essentially redirected ARPA money is put into the capital improvements budget. That is going to lower the capital needs going forward. And again, it is in this case, a more fiscally sound way of taking care of capital needs because you don't have to pay debt for 15 years on the borrowing that otherwise would have been required. Another key thing that happens in this budget is that a decision was made not to withdraw any money from reserves. And that's important. Now, we all know reserves are there to be spent. The city typically makes a transfer every year out of something called its Public Debt Amortization Fund, out of its Transportation Fund, most specifically out of its Tax Stabilization Fund, which is specifically has been created for that purpose, to try to keep property taxes down by having a reserve where you can put year-end surplus monies and then use those dollars in future budgets to reduce property tax levies. Both due to the fact that these reserves had really been considerably depleted over the past 5-6 years of very difficult budgets, and because this ARPA money was available this year, a decision was made not to withdraw money from reserves, to try to build those reserves back up a little bit and potentially have them to use in 2025 when things get challenging again. What I'm not showing you on this slide is the pension reserve. So the city has also been socking away money in a pension reserve that it fully anticipated it was going to need to use when its pension contribution spiked. And boy, did that pension contribution ever spike. So you can see what happened in 2024. Essentially, what was already a pretty gargantuan I guess fiscal people don't use that term very often, but a very large pension contribution of about $100 million had to more than double in 2024. Now, in part, that's because of that $25.5 million one-time catch-up payment I mentioned. In part, it's because of what Act 12 did. In part, it's because the city now has to start making a contribution to the Wisconsin retirement system because new employees are now going into that system. But you can see what the problem was for 2024. The good news is that despite that problem, no money was taken out of the pension reserve. And why is that? Because that's where that sales tax money went. So the comptroller has projected about $184 million will come in through that 2-cent city sales tax that is being initiated on January 1st of next year. And that's a pretty conservative estimate, we believe. The Department of Revenue had originally estimated $193 million. We've never had a city sales tax, so it's not as scientific as we'd like that estimate to be. But you can see that blue line. So what this is showing you is the various components of the city's pension payment, not just that employer contribution that I just showed you, but also some of the day-to-day administrative costs and so forth. And you can see how much it grew. The top bar is 23, the bottom bar is 24 proposed. But because of that blue, because of that sales tax money, actually the property tax levy that was needed to support the pension fund shrunk by close to $40–50 million. And so that freed up more money as well for general city purposes. So that's what allowed the pension contribution to be accommodated without having to dip into that pension reserve. One of the other good news items of this budget is that departmental spending has really caught up. And clearly we can have an argument, and I know what the Ernst & Young report is doing, what the report that I'm going to preview in a second is doing, is talking about that we believe there are still efficiencies that can be recognized. But I say this to you as an organization that has been around for 110 years as a fiscal watchdog. There was a need for the city to spend more on city services. Again, it was like a drip, drip, drip. Part of that need was actually mandated. One other element of Act 12 that I haven't mentioned yet is that the city needs to use the increment of sales tax increase every year to shore up its fire and police staffing. And so one of the things that is also happening in this budget is they're getting a head start on that. There's 15 net positions, sworn strength positions added to the Milwaukee Police Department. There's going to be a new a new engine company initiated for the city after seeing cuts to the fire department year after year after year. So this budget is also able to play some catch up in that regard. So you probably were thinking, I'm not going to go there yet, but hey, Henken's been up here now for 10 or 15 minutes and he's yet to give us any bad news. So you knew there was a but, and so here's the but. You don't have to be Alan Greenspan to know that if you're taking $110 million and plugging it into your operating budget and it's one-time money, that the following year, when that money goes away, you have a $110 million hole. Now, I already told you about some of the things that the city did with that $110 million to ensure that there isn't a full hole, but there's still a hole. So what this visual is showing you is that dark bar, negative bar on the left is the loss of the ARPA money. Now, So again, ostensibly going in $110 million hole. Well, the hole is less than that because that $25.5 million catch-up payment, that doesn't have to be made in 2025. You don't have to devote $37 million of cash to your capital budget. If you go back down to more typical levels, that frees up about another $36 million for 2025. You do have growth in revenue streams. That sales tax revenue is going to grow. We're assuming, just for argument's sake, 2% growth in city fees and in the property tax. So all of those will be good or offsetting items in 2025. But you are still left, as this slide shows, with about a $32 million hole. Now, how do we put that into perspective? Well, 32 million is not 183 million. So obviously the situation is much, much better. But I'm going to be honest. Going in, I thought that the city would have some decent breathing room, not only for 2024, but also for 2025. And that's simply not the case. Because of the need to do some of these catch-up items, that hole still exists. Now, the good news is that 32 million, and it's far too early, and I'm sure I'm getting glances from the mayor's staff and the mayor. It's like, hey, Rob, we can't worry about 2025 yet. We're still putting the finishing touches here on the 24 budget. And so again, we don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but the fact is that the city is going to be able to dip into reserves to some extent in 2025. Again, that's what they're there for, particularly that pension reserve. There may be other opportunities for revenue growth, but still, that's a real hole in the budget. And our prognosis is it's not going to be devastating. It's possible that a hole of that magnitude still can be addressed without any noticeable cuts to city services and programming. But still, beginning in 2025, the city is back into structural deficit mode. So my reputation as the Grim Reaper and the Milwaukee's buzzkill has been sustained. But now let me end with just a quick preview. As I said, the forum has a report coming out on Friday that is sort of a nice bookend to the Ernst & Young report. Much narrower focus. We very specifically, at the behest of the mayor and County Executive Crowley, we took a look at opportunities for service sharing between the city and the county for so-called back office administrative services. So what are those services? Very busy slide here, but we're listing the 10 that we took a close look at over a period of several months, ranging from audit to payroll to general accounting, toward the bottom to things like fleet management and facilities management. And what we did was we held those up against 4 different criteria. The first was, is there a real similarity in the service between the city and the county? If there is, that may mean there's some service sharing potential. Is there a potential opportunity, if you were to merge these services, to be able to generate some staff reductions, some operational efficiencies? The third one, are there major challenges facing both governments? Maybe a need for new technology, which is the case in terms of fiscal and budget and payroll for the city. Is there some new mandate coming from the federal government or state government that's requiring both governments to have to invest in something? Might that be an opportunity to share and to do so collaboratively? And finally, we took a look at whether there's a chance for efficiency, even if the two sides did not merge, but they just centralized within their own governments. We held up the 10 areas against each of those 4, and where we ended up is essentially 6 different areas that we are going to be suggesting are ripe for city and county leaders to now work with us over the next 6 to 8 months to roll up our sleeves and figure out how these services might be either shared, and there's a whole spectrum from, basically just sharing some staff positions and equipment, all the way to fully consolidating the service and having one human resources department, for example, for city and county government. Each of these, while we in our initial scan deem them promising, they need lots more research, lots more analysis. There may be some very legitimate practical considerations as to why the time is just not ripe for some of this to happen. But we think that there is potential opportunity here in several different areas. And again, you'll get to hear or see a lot more about that in a report that's coming out on Friday. So with that, I am done. Hope I kept Joel on schedule here. And thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Rob. Just a couple of things, and I'm going to go through, do I have the clicker to go to my slides, Heather? I'm going to go through some slides, just a handful about the 200-page report that, again, some of you have seen already, and all of you will have access to today. Just a couple things before I start. One, any time that we have the opportunity to hear from Rob and the work that he does, I think we all become better informed and better able to be engaged and involved in the right way in our community. And as I was talking about changes that are taking place within the GMC, for those of you who were part of our strategic planning effort, we ended up with an organizational structure that also had in it a box that was maybe a body that would be doing research and comparing what we're doing at the GMC or in Milwaukee versus other places. And over time, it's become very apparent to us that exists already in this community through the policy forum. And so instead of filling that box with a person who lives at the GMC, in 2024, we're embarking on investing resources with the policy forum and doing a series of work and reports with them, and Rob and I have talked, or our staffs have talked too, about potentially focusing those things in on public safety almost exclusively in 2024, one of our community's big objectives, but really trying to find the right way for us to tie resources together in the community that makes sense for us. So we're not only better informed, but we also know what's going on elsewhere around the country and have those things. So again, I just value what Rob does, and I know all of us do. What we have seen happen at the city here and kind of bringing us back from the brink would not have happened without the well-informed research that the Policy Forum has done really over the last 15 years. The other thing that I want to do before I bring up the couple slides that I have is just, and I think everybody gets this, but why do we care? Why are we spending an hour today talking about combining services for mowing or accounting services, or when I bring up things here about vacating the 809 North Broadway building? I think it probably is apparent to most of you, but at the beginning of the year, we were faced with the prospect of 20% of the police force being let go or more, or 20% of the people who work for the City of Milwaukee. As Rob said, over the course of the last 20 years in this period of scarcity, there really has been, a lot of those services have been drawn back. And for those of us who live in the city, if you do business in the city, you want to attract employees here, you want to bring employees back to your businesses downtown, we need the city to be our partner in that. And they simply were not going to be able to be our valued partner in that. And so, it really is important that what we've been able to do here. So I'm going to go through just some overview of the operational review here. First of all, I just want to note that the support for this, and we launched this a year ago, the support for this came from a wide variety of resources in the community, the nonprofit community, the philanthropic community, the business community, individuals. Lots of you have played a role in getting to where we are. And again, to set the context of where we were when we started this, we did not know, there was certainly no path towards certainty of being able to generate additional local revenue. And so this was an exercise of really putting everything on the table and looking at everything that the city does in terms of the way it operates. But again, I want to express appreciation to all of those organizations. This is, I may win for some of the busiest slides of the day and not Rob today, but really what this outlines for you here, and again, this is a GMC produced report, but we had support from Ernst & Young, who has done this work throughout the country, and we really appreciate the work that they did. They were here last week to talk to the mayor and his cabinet. They have been here throughout the process. The cabinet has seen iterations of this. The city has been really terrific partners in this. I know several city staff are at the back table and walked in with the mayor here. Molly, Nick, and others who have been part of this from day one and really have been our partners in collaboration. collaborators in this. But what this, really the same message that Rob gave as the punchline of his discussion was that, starting right away in 2025, the city is facing at least some structural deficit. We all hoped and thought that there might be a little bit of breathing room, but there really is very little. On ours, I think this comes to about a $17 million, between 17 and 30. When the city budget director saw our numbers and we had this discussion last week, he said, "You're probably too low." So Rob, he probably endorses something closer to yours. And that's, again, being, I think you're conditioned to be pessimistic if you've been the city budget director at any time in the last 20 years. Just to kind of what we did in this report, the three areas that were looked at, and I'm not going to go too deeply into any of them, but they were really, the situation was, we knew at the beginning was dire. Really, what could we do in that first column to look at cost reductions? Where are things that we can either combine services, find more efficient ways to do things? How can you increase revenue? Could you monetize some resources that you have? Could you look at ways of generating additional local revenue? A lot of those, for those of you who are familiar with the way things operate in the city of Milwaukee, a lot of those take state legislative approval. We got approval for the sales tax. So a lot of the report includes ways that the city could generate additional local revenue, but a lot of those need authorization from the state, and we're not likely to get those, nor are we likely to even explore those in the coming years because of the sales tax. And then finally, and not to be understated, is the necessity around improved performance. How do we act more innovatively? We had one section of the work that was looking at other best practices around the country. What communities have done around engaging very innovatively in the way that we do work in municipal government. So those were the kind of the three lines of work that we looked at. These are examples of the cities that were benchmarked against, a lot of them being Midwestern cities, but as far afield as Tucson, Arizona, and then a group in the Northeast. Really, this was around potentially like-sized budget, but also similar in the way that they execute and do their work at the local level. So again, we have lessons that we have gained and relationships we forged with this set of 12 peer cities that will likely continue over time. Kind of just a little bit here, and again, another busy slide, but looking at what along the pathway of that arrow, what were the things that we could look at and explore? There were the leveraging of assets, and that the first one down there in the dark blue. There are things like, there are parking structures, there are city facilities, the 809 North Broadway, there are properties in the Menominee Valley. What could we do to potentially look at those, and how does that work? We could look at shared services or process improvements up on the upper left here. There are, again, getting into some of the minutia, things like log loaders, the street sweeping, and what happens in the library and janitorial services. This was the granular level that we got to here. We could look at other funding opportunities. I don't have my glasses on. I don't see what that the third one says there. But can someone help me out? The third bullet there. Well, this just outlines the other areas and what we were going to be able to do. Could we raise revenue? Are there things that we could do, and things that you could do and own source revenue without the need of work at the state level? And again, this is just an example. This is a 200-page report. This is an example of one of the tear sheets in here. One of the things, this is a gain sharing, which is finding efficiency, and we suggested that they find efficiency immediately as much as possible within the fleet services within the city. And the idea, which is very much of a business-like idea, is to share the savings amongst employees and with the city, and returning some of those savings to the general fund. This is one of the consultants that we worked on here, had practical experience, used to be the budget director at the City of Baltimore. They employed something like this, and over the first few years, we're able to save millions of dollars, but then also able to turn back about $2,000 to every member of their fleet services division after the first year. You can imagine, Rob just got through talking about the way things have been and where things have been for the city in terms of having to forego enhancement in salary. If you could find ways to both operate more efficiently, but then actually be able to reward your employees at the end of the year, that would have material value. But this is just one example. But you'll see that we looked at things around a number of areas. The ability over, how soon could you do this? What kind of impact would it have? How feasible is it? Also looked at things not only on its fiscal impact, but also its impact on equity. When we started down this path with the mayor and the city, it was very much around putting equity at the center of this and racial equity as something that we need to make sure that we're exploring. The city does that with every city service that they deliver. As we're thinking about the way that the city operates differently, we needed to do the same. So this is just, again, an example of, you'll see volumes of these in the report that are there. This is going to be the most, I guarantee, the most busy slide that you are going to see on here. And I don't invite any of you to try to read what it is, but I will tell you this is the matrix of the dozens of recommendations on it. But it moves to the upper right are those that are both would have the most impact and have the most feasibility, so that we could be able to do those things. There are some that are marked that we are looking to do, that we put a timeline of being able to be most feasible in the next 6 months. And so those are the ones that we're going, and I'll outline just a couple of those here. Those are the ones that we're going to get to work on right away. But this will just, again, gives you an idea of the breadth of the recommendations. So here are those that we've identified, and when the mayor comes up, we'll talk a little bit more about these as some of the ones that have the most feasibility and we think can have be able to have movement on over the next 12 months. Things like municipal advertising, putting up, other cities have done billboards, they've used city facilities, whether in some places, and we couldn't do this in Milwaukee with bus shelters because that's a county thing, but we could do this with garbage cans, with city street furniture, and other communities do that. And the way that this happens is that a third party, most often, the city is not out there just banging on doors to do that. There are third parties who do this with other cities. They get a portion of what they can make, and it's been successful in other places, and we think that there's the ability to do this here. On the health benefits side, the city has already a high deductible health plan that is married with a health savings account. I think the number of the uptake of that at the city is very limited, like less than 25 have taken this on. And in business, we all know that for a certain portion of employees, especially younger employees, healthier employees, this is something that lots of businesses have done, and frankly, lots in the public sector have started to do, but the city has not really marketed this, and we believe that there's ways that they can do that. And going down the line, the city and the county both operate nurseries within a few blocks of each other in Franklin, and we believe that there's ways to consolidate that and potentially do something more. One area that I know the mayor has been passionate about is around greening Milwaukee and making sure that the tree canopy is something that we can enjoy not only now but well into the future. The notion of selling carbon credits to businesses and using that. The city of Minneapolis has done this and monetized that. It's not huge dollars that you get out of it, but if those dollars can be reinvested into your urban forestry, there are things that can be done there. I already mentioned gain sharing, and then the last one on here, the speed and red light cameras. It was only a week ago, I believe, that the mayor and the police chief were at the scene of yet another fatality that happened around reckless driving here in Milwaukee, and leaving that, and it was not a reckless driving incident, but a malfunction of a vehicle. The chief got rear-ended when he was leaving that. But all of those things, and again, not to make it too personal, but one of those it took place on about 100th and Capitol, about 2 blocks away from where my daughter goes to school. My daughter drives down Capitol Drive every day, and this didn't happen at 2 a.m. It happened at 10 a.m., and so these are things that are very personal to many of us. But the state legislature is right now considering legislation that would allow the city of Milwaukee to put up 75 red light and speed cameras in the city of Milwaukee, 5 in every aldermanic district. It could raise upwards of about $40 million over the next decade. But the other thing about it, and we did comparisons of what happened in the city of Chicago and other places, it's not a sustainable revenue source. You know why? Because people change their behavior, which is what we want them to do. If you've driven around the city, you have seen what the city is doing. If you've gone along 6th Street or along Valete Street, the city is putting up islands of concrete to stop people from doing that, from speeding along the right lane and doing things that are reckless. We need 1,000 little things, and this is yet another thing that we can do that can do that. It can be some short-term revenue, but it's also something that would get people to change their behavior. And so that's one area that we want to focus on too. Again, and these are the last ones I'll bring up before the mayor comes up to have a discussion with me around property disposition. Some of these things, I think they are requiring some work, and I'll talk with the mayor a little bit about what the business community potentially can do around these things. But 809 North Broadway, it's about 25% full, that building, and there's space in between City Hall and the Zeidler building to potentially put that into other productive use. There are other things on here about, redoing the health clinic model. Are there nonprofits who can potentially deliver services better than the city has done it? Bridge automation. We all, I think, recall what happened a couple of summers ago when someone from out of town was stuck on a bridge and fell to their death. And so we need to make sure that whatever we're doing is anchored in public safety. But as we were looking around at what other places do, there are some places that do centralized programming of all of their bridges in an automated way, and they've been able to both save money but also make sure that those are secure. Those are things that we can do as a community. So here are, again, these are a list of other ones that we could do. The last thing before I bring the mayor up is just kind of on the innovation side. We also had a group, and it had about 25 people from the city bringing forth their good ideas, comparing those with what others did around the country, and how can we truly operate differently. The mayor has already instituted a couple of these things in his administration. And again, these are examples. This Map Go is one of the things that the mayor has done. The mayor has had a system where an accountability system where every department comes in and does a report frequently. But this is, how do you put the best and the best services of the city together around problems? And the mayor has done it. I'll let him talk a little bit about what the city has done already on this. But these are best practices that we have seen elsewhere that can be implemented in the city of Milwaukee. So again, what do we do from here? We do the release today. The city is going to support this effort. I'll let the mayor talk a little bit about what the city is doing. We are putting together a group from the GMC. I'm pleased to announce that a couple people sitting up front here, Betsy Brenner and David Gay, have volunteered that they would be co-leads of the work that we're going to be doing, holding each other accountable, the city and the GMC and the community at large, doing work on this moving forward. David was instrumental from Ernst & Young in making sure that we got the absolute most out of our money in this report, so they will help lead these efforts moving forward. So with that, why don't I have the mayor come up for just a couple minutes, and we'll talk a little bit about what we're going to do here before we introduce the table talk discussion. Mayor Johnson. All right, so they all just heard me blather on for probably longer than Rob did about this, but just a little context of kind of where we were when we started this and where we are now in, kind of all of the discussion that's been gone on to this point.
Sure, where were we before we started all this? I think Rob said it pretty well. We were on the precipice of disaster. Like, we were going to fall off a fiscal cliff and burn and die. It was not going to be pretty if we did not work collaboratively. And I want to thank everybody that was a partner in getting Wisconsin Act 12 passed, our partners at the county, our partners elsewhere, but especially our partners here at the GMC for all of your efforts reaching out to state legislators and the like. But where we are now is a much better place. We're not looking at falling off a fiscal cliff. in the next year, we're in a position where now we can add more police officers, we can add more firefighters, we can keep our libraries open. We're not looking at cutting hundreds and hundreds of other city employees who provide a number of services across Milwaukee. So I feel very comfortable with where we are, knowing good and well that there are still some challenges in the years to come, but it's a more solid footing that we stand on right now than what we did when we first started this initiative.
A question for you, and I didn't go over it much on here, but there were some very big ticket items, some of which have been talked about in the city before, like selling the waterworks or trying to monetize the waterworks, selling off city parking structures and parking lots. And again, to be brutally honest, those would have been kind of the Hail Mary things that, absent a sales tax, the city would have been almost required to go out and do. There are very few assets that the city has. So, we're not in a must-do on those things, but there's opportunity to have thoughtful dialogue on it. What's the way that we can constructively, as a community, have the right kind of dialogue about those and other things? And how does the GMC and the people sitting in this room who are your allies, how do they play a constructive role in that?
A number of ways, and I'm glad, again, that we're not in a position where we have to consider selling off our waterworks. I'm glad that we're not in a position where we have to consider selling off our parking meters. We've seen in other communities that have taken some of those actions that there have been some issues, some trouble, or perhaps you get a one-time infusion of resources, and then the entity that you sell one of these assets to, they end up holding it for several years beyond, and then just milking that money away from citizens, not going back into service delivery. So I am so glad that we're not in that position. What I think that you all can do to help us is to do what you have done to help us to get to this point right now. Continue to be engaged with the GMC and continue to be engaged with us as we seek to find ways to make sure we provide more efficiencies in the services that we deliver at the City of Milwaukee. I mean, Joel, you mentioned it a couple times already about the 809 building that's on the City Hall complex. It's just to the east of City Hall, closer to Wells Street. The building, as you mentioned, is not full, but I think it provides an opportunity for somebody like me as a mayor who wants to see more growth, wants to see more development in Milwaukee. It's kind of ironic because the Commissioner of City Development, Lafayette Crump's office, is in there.
It's a nice office, as I recall.
It is a nice office. So it will present an opportunity potentially for us to have some other downtown development there at a place like that. And that's where we would lean on some of the expertise of folks in this room and beyond to work to push some development opportunity there or other places as well.
And even on that specific project, there's on the 4th floor, I think there's lots of the IT infrastructure for the city. So this is not a new idea. I think it's been talked about before, but sometimes that's the stumbling block. And I think there's probably expertise, and there are people and companies here who have had similar projects, and that's the kind of work I think we want to engage in, is how do you do that in a way that's not going to harm any city services or not going to cause any disruption, but if you have a will to do it, there is probably a way, and I think that's our collective, the imperative that we have is how do we do that?
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I mean, that's my philosophy. That's the lane that I usually try to drive in, is what can we do that adds value, but also does not adversely affect the taxpayers, the citizens in the City of Milwaukee. For instance, I'm not going to talk too much about this. There's a big vote in Madison happening tomorrow about the Brewers and all this. But when it comes to the city's share, because the state required that there was going to be a local share from local governments, we tried to structure it in such a way where there was no impact to the taxpayers, the citizens, the people who receive services from the City of Milwaukee. So that's exactly what we'll be looking to do here with 809, moving that infrastructure out for our IT services that people use to go online to purchase parking tickets, to check out stats on the Milwaukee Police Department, to get licenses for businesses, to find out the information about who their alderperson is, or whatever other level of government. There is value, there is use there, but we want to make sure that those things are not negatively impacted for our citizens.
So for everybody here who has seen, some of these efforts that have taken place and then been frustrated that it just sits on a shelf and, it becomes a nice paperweight. I think you're trying to do things and your budget includes ways that I think you're trying to give action to this and make sure that there's momentum behind it. Do you want to talk just a little bit about what that means and then what the rest of us, what that means for how we progress on this?
Sure. So this is not going to be a report that goes and sits on a shelf. Hopefully you paid attention to some of those really busy slides.
Sorry.
Hopefully you paid attention to some of those busy slides, but one of the slides I think that speaks truth to my sort of leadership and what I'm bringing from home to my position as mayor is working to make sure that we don't put money on the credit card that we don't have to. I don't like to owe people. I don't like to pay interest. All right, so we're doing that. The other thing was the cash financing. So we're not, doing that and having to incur those expenses down the line. One of the things that I'm interested in to make sure that we're not having this sit on the shelf is bringing on an innovation director, somebody who will be the point person to make sure that we're taking advantage of the opportunities that are presented here and constantly working to make sure that the city is looking for efficiencies as we move forward. You listed it in one of those slides as well. We're in a stronger position now, but there still are challenges that loom in the years ahead. So we can't afford to sit on our hands. We can't afford to let this simply sit on a shelf. We've got to continue to take action. That's what we intend to do.
Last quick one remark and then last quick question. One, I think one of the benefits of doing this and over the last several months being engaged with your administration at the beginning of the year facing the prospects of the dire cuts, I think it's very hard for people to have a high level of morale. But one thing I saw in the consultants that we partnered with this, they observed all the time was that just the ability for city staff to come up with their ideas and to see some of their ideas put on paper as this is something good, it's something we're going to continue to work on. I think that helped them. And again, I can't express enough, I think, the appreciation of the commitment of your staff. They all had their own day jobs, but they saw iterations of this. They dived in very deeply to get this done. So very much appreciated. The last thing before we go to having some suggestions here. So again, for the people sitting here there will be some of these actions ultimately will be yours to decide. Some are yours with the Common Council. How do we engage appropriately? How do we engage constructively in that kind of a process with you and the legislative process?
Well, first let me say that I am so glad to hear, and I know this already myself because I have the privilege of leading these staff, that there are so many people in the city government that dig in, even above and beyond the work that they ordinarily get paid for. They go above and beyond working to make sure that we provide good service to our citizens and looking out for the betterment of the city government, capital C, in the long term. So I'm not surprised by that, and I'm glad that you acknowledge them because they work very, very hard. That includes my Chief of Staff, Nick Desiato, Molly King, who's in the audience as well. So thank you guys so much for your work, and others as well from city government. How can you guys continue to be involved with us here? I think one of the things is this, right? Having the opportunity to sit down, not just with me, but other officials from my administration to talk about what our strategies are, what our steps are, what we're doing to make sure that we stay efficient. I know that there are some committees that the GMC has as well that we would have some interest in taking part in as well. This has got to be open. This has got to be public. This has got to be transparent, to make sure that folks know that their city government is working for them today and looking to make sure that we remain efficient and nimble for tomorrow, because we are delivering services. I would say in Madison, oftentimes to legislators, we're delivering services not just to my constituents who live in the city of Milwaukee, but to our daily commuters from the WOW counties who come into the city of Milwaukee each and every single day for work or play. We're delivering services to literally the quarter of all people who come to the state of Wisconsin. They come here to Milwaukee. They expect city services, whether they know it or not. And we're also delivering services to some of the most iconic businesses in the state of Wisconsin that happen to call the city of Milwaukee home. So all those things are important, and I want to make sure that we're public and transparent in the way that we're addressing service delivery for all those constituencies.
So just one last thing, and then we'll spend, I think, just a few minutes discussing at the table, because I think I've eaten up most of the time that we were supposed to have for that. But this is a model that we will deploy moving forward. So on the next issue that we will kind of announce this on is around public safety. Between now and the end of the year, we'll announce co-chairs from the GMC who will be part of leading those efforts, invite other members and community members to be part of that process, and lay out what the path is going to look like in 2024. At the same time, with the co-chairs who are leading this effort, will be engaged with the city and engaged with our other partners over the next few weeks. So really look forward to that, and look forward to that being the work and how we keep score on how we're doing on these things. With that, I think I'm going to do one more slide here, and there are just a couple of questions on here for you to address as a table, and then we'll take a few minutes doing that, and then Peggy will come up and close the meeting. So we welcome you to give your reactions to this to each other at the tables.
Just thought I'd take the opportunity to ask, unfortunately the mayor did need to head back to City Hall, but does anybody have a reaction you want to share, an observation about what we're doing here, something that came out of your table talk in the next few minutes, or importantly, a question for Rob, who is still here? If so, we can do that for a few minutes, and then I'll close out the meeting, and don't leave, because yes, I have another door prize. Yes. Karen.
To continue focusing on residual and recurring revenue and leverage the existing assets. So the things like the parking meters, muni advertisements, things like that. So there's just a lot of those opportunities, but the recurring and residual revenue, that's one. Number two, we talked about learning from our peer tier 2 cities, because frankly, they're better run than some of the tier 1 cities. So really learning from that peer group who are really growing through innovation and other kinds of considerations, and also knowing how to manage funding from all different sources.
Great, thank you for that. Anyone else?
On the need to figure out how do you prioritize out of all the things we couldn't read in the slides into a handful of initiatives that really move the needle, and then create some buy-in from the city and figure out an accountability mechanism to make sure things get done.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that will be one of the priorities that Betsy and David are going to be working on. Is one of the critical things we set up when we established the strategic priorities was, how do we hold ourselves accountable? And having each committee determine that very early, very upfront. One of the things we were talking about, very similar to what you were saying, is if you look at whatever that gap is, 17, 30, whatever, and you break it into more bite-sized pieces, and we certainly know we have the mayor's buy-in to hold his leaders accountable. And I know our friend Lafayette is willing to raise his hand and be right there in the middle of it, even if it means he gets a different office someday. And one of the other things that I loved to hear, and I think it will fit well with us, is that delivers opportunities, bite-sized opportunities for us to share feedback. And, because we've all had experiences with this. When we were hearing about, oh my God, the challenges of moving the IT structure, I'm sitting next to John Coates thinking he moved an entire headquarters into a new building, and this idea of we can't possibly move IT. We have all sorts of people here around our tables and elsewhere who'd say, well, I can help you with that. Here's how that worked well. So we're on the same page there. Right, any other feedback? I would say just, again, write it down on those cards and leave them there. So I want to thank you all for attending. A special thanks to our speakers. Rob, I'll echo Joel's comments. I always walk away smarter whenever you're in the room, so I thank you for that. We hope that the insight from this operational review, which I do encourage you to read, those of you who don't already have a link soon will have a link. It is a long read, but the first, I don't remember, 30 pages or so, 23, okay, thank you, Joel. First 23 pages are an executive summary. So you can sort of start there, and then each of those areas has a dedicated section and a deep dive. So you are actually seeing in Joel's eye charts up there some of the actual slides from the report. So it's EY did a very nice job working with the GMC and the city to make this readable. So we really want you to pay attention to it, to read it, and to start being really thoughtful about how you can engage, how we can engage as the GMC. So as Rob mentioned, we've made historic progress here. We need to celebrate that. We need to continue to celebrate that because of the passage of Act 12, but we know that we have challenges coming up, and so I'm really thrilled to hear that the mayor is very focused on making sure that we don't sit on our hands here. We know there's much to be done, and we also know that with the GMC, it can be done. Again, a reminder to provide your meeting feedback on the cards. Your collective voices make us stronger. You can leave them in the basket over there where your name tags go. We will be back at it in the new year on January 8th, so if you don't have that date on your calendar, please put it on there. I wish you all happy holidays, but we anticipate connecting about today's updates and progress a number of times before the holiday season is over. So while I will close out the meeting, it's time for me to announce the door prize. So if you wonder why am I doing this, other than the obvious stay here till the end reason, it's because it allows us to highlight organizations in our community who are doing things, who are providing things, who are frankly just outstanding in their field, some of whom you know, some of whom you may not know, who are doing things to make this community better. And today is no different. So as we enter into the busy holiday season, we know you all are going to be rushing to finish things, whether it's at your business, the calendar year's end is coming, whether you're attending all sorts of holiday functions, parties, etc., shopping for gifts, preparing wonderful meals for your family. Today's gift is going to give someone an opportunity to take a break and let someone else do the heavy lifting. So today, somebody who has just agreed to step in and make the holiday season a little busier is going to get rewarded with a $100 gift certificate to Bartolotta's Restaurant, donated by Keith Trafton, and we thank Keith for that. As we all know, Bartolotta's is a great pillar in this community. It's one of the things that makes Milwaukee great. And I'm happy to say, Betsy Brenner, you are the recipient of this gift card. So thank you. All right. Thank you all for being here.